Welcome to the A.L.L podcast.
We're the Academy of Logic and Light. I'm Megan.
I'm Kat.
I'm Julie. We are an ethical community education platform that provides a safe space for people to practice their spirituality without indoctrination.
Just a newsflash. Well, newsflash for all our listeners. This is our second go at this podcast. I was like, okay guys, I'm gonna start recording, and then I pushed it, but then I didn't push okay. Apparently I have to there's some safety measures in case small children were doing this. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
They forgot to hit record, and we had the most beautiful conversation.
It really was a good conversation.
It lives in my heart.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
right.
we're
Tune into the ether if you want to hear it, because it's out there somewhere.
it's out there.
Extended version.
The lost tapes.
It was beautiful, and we're going to have it again, but hopefully something new, and we're going to try not to just repeat the same conversation, but we still want to touch all of the things. So I love, so I'm Megan. I have Julie here with me, and we have Emily here with us. And Emily, we met on a street corner, and she's told us the most amazing story about it.
I got these beautiful crystals.
Yes.
They're so gorgeous.
The smoky quartz from the Mauryan mine. That's another Google for anybody who's listening, who's just like curious about this big black rock. It's actually smoky quartz, and it's almost never that dark. Just that one mine has it that dark. So.
Obsessed.
I love that you chose that one. It really like said a lot to me about you, because that's one that I feel like the energy kind of intimidates a lot of people. And so like the fact that, and now that I know you're a Capricorn, I'm like, that is just so perfect that you're just like, hi, I am just like that, you know, like I'm also strong. So yeah.
Well, no, that's why we need the crystals, because we need to like emulate it from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I love smoky quartz. I honestly think that smoky quartz had a lot to do with my healing journey, because like it represents and it keeps you focused on a frequency that is really clarifying, but also like realistic about the dark sides of things. And so I highly recommend it to anybody.
Yeah. Well,
who is this kitty? I've been meaning to ask you, and since we're still kind of starting off, and
This is Moo. He really loves the 7 o'clock time slot because it's right before dinner, but he just needs so much attention, and it's only right now at our 7 o'clock spots.
That's so sweet. I love that. Hi, Moo.
Baby. He's like one foot in this world and 1 foot in the other.
They do. I firmly believe that cats are clairvoyant, and yeah, people don't give that enough credit. I mean, people are clairvoyant too. If you want tips on that, I'm happy to talk to anyone.
Yes.
But yeah, that's definitely my Rosa and every single one of them. I have 4 cats, so it's fine.
Yes. Okay, so tell us about your journey with clairvoyance then. Start down one of these rabbit holes.
wait, sorry.
Okay.
I definitely want to go down this rabbit hole. But first, will you just tell us about like what you're doing now, like what you have to offer people, just before we get into the weeds, because
like, who is this woman?
As we know, we can talk. Like, it's going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I really appreciate your like keeping the whole thing on the rails. I love that.
We all need Megan.
Except for when I don't push record, guys. That's the opposite of on the rails.
Yeah, that is true. But it's okay. No, it's been good. And so I'm a yoga teacher, I guess is the way to say it. I take a very different approach to yoga than a lot of the West does. I don't teach in studios. I don't charge people a certain amount per amount of time. I really like to work with people on what I call like a sliding scale or donation basis. And that works out fine for me, because what's comfortable for somebody is not comfortable for somebody else. And so, and every body needs healing, every mind needs healing, every spirit needs healing, right? So like I have some clients who I work with for free, and I have other clients who pay enough that they're basically paying for 2 people. So like it all works out, and that's one thing that I do. I also make my butter, which we can go back down that rabbit hole in a minute. But yeah, that is probably the single thing I have the most passion for in my work is yoga. And wait, where did you guys go?
Sorry, I was trying to fix it so it's you mostly. Sorry.
Oh, I hate that. Thank you.
We're hiding.
People know what we look like, trust me. We're good.
Okay.
Julie's told me several times. She's like, I hate the podcast because I'm on it. But if we can make the podcast just without me, I'll listen to it.
Okay, well, I really resonate with that, Julie. Thank you for saying that. And honestly, aesthetically, it does look better like that for your listeners. But also, I'm just like, hi, everyone.
Hi.
You're not a Leo. There's no way.
This is what I'm saying. Nothing about me. And like, I am just a walking contradiction. Let's start there. I'm a yoga teacher. There's a lot of things. So, yeah, I liked that actually, the balance, because I hold no shame on either. Truly. I just I guess worry about what people think about me, if what that means about me to other people. But in the spirit of authenticity, I was going to say I'm a yoga teacher and an addict, right? And I prefer that term. Alcohol was my drug, but I mean, also not in a drug way. I've been a very addictive personality type person in my life, which is where the yoga comes in, right? Because that has been my saving grace, and that is the balancer. And those two things combined led me to want natural products that weren't on the market, which is why I started the butter. And now I'm also starting as a publisher for a magazine, which is my day job, I guess, as the yoga stuff kind of comes back. For everybody who missed it, I've been in the hospital for most of the last year. I was really sick for a few years. And so I'm just now getting back to working with people and being outside and enjoying life again and all sorts of different things. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good place to start.
Yes, I love it.
It all comes back full circle.
And I really liked, and I wrote this down even, but will you tell us what your company tagline is, or
sure.
motto you had? Because I loved it so much, and I'm like, this is good work.
Yeah, I was thinking I probably should have had the logo. It's really pretty, but it's a bunch of things that have healed me in my life. It's a lot of natural things and symbology to different lineages that have helped me a lot. The moon is on there. She's one of my greatest teachers. And then Via ESP is the company name. So that's me. And what comes through me is what is encompassed in this company. So as of now, the intuitive picks have been, it started with the butter, and now crystals and Palo Santo have been added. And the tagline is find what heals you. And that part's really important to me, the you. And also the find. And also the what. Okay, so I picked 4 words I like. But the point being, each person is capable of finding what they need. Each person is capable of knowing what they need and finding it. And so my job in this company is just to help people on that process, basically. So if in working together, you mentioned that you need help with meditation and you feel like that would really help you with whatever mental stuff is feeling stuck or different than you want it to be in some way. Meditation is great for teaching you the power of your own mind. And it's also probably the hardest thing to teach, which is where the crystals come in, and I highly recommend anybody listening to this who thinks they can't meditate, take deep breaths while watching a flame. And every single time you get distracted, because you will. And that's one of the things that nobody talks about in meditation is we are human beings. We are going to have thoughts. There's no way to just remove that. And if anybody says they're doing that, they're lying. But anyway, what is possible is to slow the flow of thoughts. And we do that by picking a point of focus. So if you sit with a flame or anything external, anything that inspires you, these crystals make really great Oh yeah, that kind of does catch right now. And you can just change and see the prisms, right? So these things outside of yourself, focus on that. And when a thought comes up, take a breath and let it go and focus back on the flame. And if you just do that, you don't need me. There, I just undid my whole business model. But seriously, I mean, I just made a post about this on Instagram about you don't need a yoga teacher because nobody really is ever going to know you as well as you do. And nobody's ever going to understand what your dreams mean or what your body is trying to tell you better than you are. And so with that, I like to help people find that in themselves, that innate wisdom, that ESP, that gnosis that everybody has, whether you call it intuition, gut instinct, anything like gut feelings. Yeah, everybody has this stuff. And it all comes from somewhere, right? And so honing that in, I think, is something that really flips people from, like, when we talk about being the main character in their own lives, like that's the difference, is really understanding who you are, because then you can go from there to living authentically to what feels good to you. And then you enjoy your life, like, and then you're not depressed or whatever else, like, and we were talking about this earlier. So, I mean, tell me how much you want me to talk about now, but, I am living proof of this. I 5 years ago was diagnosed with, and this is mostly for anyone listening. This isn't just somewhere where I read this or I did a yoga teacher training and now I think I know everything about this. I don't think I know everything by any means, but also these are teachings that have stayed with me because I faced things that, from doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists and so many different perspectives, was insurmountable psychologically and biologically for a human body and mind to heal from, probably. Psychologists were talking about me not being here by choice. And doctors were saying, well, if it's not by choice, her body's going to give out any day now. So these teachings are really sacred to me. And yeah, sorry, I said really sacred to me too quickly. They are. And because of that, I think everybody should have access to them. So everything I do is by donation. I want people to be able to pay something that they feel it's worth and that they feel is fair to them based on whatever's going on in their lives. And also, what's fair to me. Like, I've definitely had some people try to just like free. And it's like, at some point I can't keep, because the goal of this company is to get you to a place where you don't need me, right? Like on the little sign that I have at the markets I go to, it ends with, when you no longer need me, we both will have succeeded, right? Because that's the goal of what I do. And so whatever that takes, I'm willing to do. And out of respect for myself, if that's something where somebody just thinks that I'm going to like hand them all the answers to life, like, there's no price that you could pay for that, but also I'm not the person who would ever claim to do that, So like, that's just not what we're doing. But yeah, so I mean, and another thing I've been thinking about doing is teaching like a basics class of, because this butter took me 11 years to make. So like and it's a very simple recipe, right? So it's not something that should theoretically take 7 years. So I'm getting a little distracted because my free spirit of a kitten has now tasted outside this season. So she's like just screaming at the door. Like, she's fine, I swear. But anyway, so he just went and grabbed her. I don't even remember where I was. I got kind of distracted by that. Oh, the butter. So this class, right? The idea with the class is it would be very easy for me to teach people how to make their own tea blends, bath blends, oil blends, salt blends. Like, I only use oil and salt and herbs to clean my entire body at this point in my life. That's not always been the case. And I mean, I'm clean. Like, I don't have weird fungus. Like, I think there's so many misinformation things around like what the body actually is benefited by. Like, Clorox helps no one. Spoiler alert. Like, I'm just kidding. I shouldn't say that. I was like, they're going to sue me. Okay.
Disinformation.
We're poor. You can't sue us.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's that piece for sure. But also, I can't say that it doesn't help anyone. I mean, getting rid of 99.9% of bacteria is great for certain situations. Beeswax is also antifungal and antibacterial, and it has a lot fewer downsides, in my opinion. I'm not a doctor or a scientist or a lawyer. Actually, I'm a scientist. That's not true. That's not true. I have a degree in neuroscience. What am I talking about? Almost. Again, for legality, almost. If I had taken algebra and like any elective, I would have a neuroscience degree.
So close.
I know. Life took me away for a little bit from that. And that's where I started doing the yoga teacher training and just kind of like, woo, out into the ether. So I'll finish it at some point. Yeah. I firmly believe that people should. Like, I was in a position where my family was able to pay for my school, so I feel obligated to finish that degree out of respect to that. However, in good time, right? Like, I found myself at the end of that, like, I can't do this or I'm going to explode. Like, neuroscience and economics requires a lot of work. And so it was just, and I was going through all sorts of like spiritual things. We were talking about that. That's the first time I died, was right around that time. I was like going through all of these inauthenticity feelings, like so much of college where I went was a lot of partying and a lot of like wildness. And also the school I was in was really hard. And so like, I was just kind of like spinning out in these two things that I felt like weren't helping me, And so I found the yoga and just kind of dove into that for a while. I was just going to say this like yoga teacher thing of like, you're telling people you're a yoga teacher. It's like that. Yeah. See, like you can be a real human. Like we're all real people. We all have like insecurities and weirdnesses and stuff. So yeah,
absolutely. And sometimes I feel like that aspect sometimes gets lost on people, is because it just, when you put somebody in a box that they're supposed to fill, when you can't picture them outside of that box. And so it can be damaging, especially, and this one's one that I've kind of been going through. It's like, oh, my mom's always been in the mom box, but like, how does she fit in other boxes? Like, do I give her grace to be something else? Because I know myself as a mom, I like want to be able to do everything. And so I think that, removing people from the boxes we put them in kind of leaves this open space for not the expectation of maintaining what my expectation is.
Yeah. That's so true. Like, I mean, that's a major reason I mentioned the moon, right? But like, it's so funny to me when we talk about the full moon and the new moon. Like the moon is always full, and she goes through these phases, right? And so does everything. And so I think, holding space and grace for that when it comes to not only other people, because of course other people, and also for me, I find it's the hardest to do with myself. Like you were talking about, like with you being a mother, right? Like you want to be everything all the time. And it's okay to be sad sometimes and happy sometimes and motivated sometimes and unmotivated sometimes. And, and it's like, it just kind of flows. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah. You had mentioned, and we talked about this before, obviously, but that the first time you died. So tell us a little bit more about like those near-death experiences and what they meant to you and how it changed your path.
Yeah. I would say I spent, like, the shortest answer I could give to this in like a general sense is I spent most of my life feeling like I didn't make sense. And both of my experiences dying made a lot of things make a lot more sense, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, because it's different to read about something, it's different to hear about something, it's different to know someone who says they experienced something or whatever. But when you experience things that cannot be explained in words that are talked about in, like, let's say your meeting room in your office building or the grocery store, like places that we are used to going and spend lots of our time, having actual experiences to back up these feelings, thoughts, intuitions, inspirations, calls to do things. Like, so many things that I wanted to do never made sense until I studied astrology, but like dying reaffirmed all of those things. And just for the sake of the people who are listening, so the first time I died was in college, and I can't necessarily confirm in like a scientific sense, like there was no like monitor on my heart on either of these experiences, but based on my experiences, I know what happened. And anyway, so the first time I was in college and I was in the midst of a party downstairs, and I mean, I wasn't on anything that would have caused this or anything like that. And I went upstairs to just take a minute for myself. And in Oregon, marijuana is legal, and I smoked a bowl of Oregon. I smoked a bowl of Oregon, and I went to stand up. And that's the last thing I remember for a minute, And I went somewhere that was not planet Earth. And and when I came back, I was on my floor. It was a hardwood floor, and my head hurt. And I was so confused because, I mean, you know what it's like coming back from a dream, right? Like, it felt like that, except I'm on the floor and my head hurts. So I imagine I must have just fallen over, passed out, whatever. But in that time, the things that I saw made me reassess my entire life. I recognized that I was not living in harmony with myself, with my spirit. I recognized that my spirit was withering. I believe that your spirit can atrophy just like any other part of your body or your mind. And I was living so far out of alignment with myself that I think that's what the reality check that needed to happen was. And so I moved out of the house that I was living in at the time. I was living with these beautiful people who I felt like I couldn't explain myself to in this way, And so I just it was a little bit of a chaotic, like jolted, like, okay, whatever, I'm just leaving and not explaining. And it, those relationships, may have suffered because of that. I hope they haven't, but it was just too much to try to explain to anybody. I didn't even know what was happening. And I thought I was going to like be locked up if I started talking about these things, like you can't exactly say like, yeah, I went somewhere and saw these blue people and like, but they weren't really people. They were like these massive gods in like this courtroom that doesn't exist on Earth. And like, all these like, okay, let's put you to bed, like, so
yes.
And I was in neuroscience at the time. I was studying neuroscience. So like I knew what these things would be diagnosed as, and I knew that the treatment was going to be medication. And I was like, this is not what that is. And honestly, just like a PSA for anybody with the diagnosis of schizophrenia, it is important to note that in other cultures, those exact same symptoms are aligned with people that they call shamans. And not only is it not considered as a disease, it's considered something to be treated really carefully and like upheld. So anyway, that's just a general note that has nothing to do with this conversation.
Still not a doctor.
Yeah, not a doctor. I don't even have a degree. I'm nobody. So anyway, so that was the first time. And then I pretty much dove into yoga after that, because that was the only thing that I felt like at the time had any prayer of starting to explain any of these things, was for me to like revisit my experiences and kind of like work through those and stuff. And I had a good bit of success in the yoga thing. I really loved traveling all over the West Coast and teaching at various festivals. They weren't like what people think of as a festival, where there's like a lot of substances and like wildness. There was a lot of wildness, but it was like the wilderness, and people were like singing and everybody was sober, and there was like elderberry tea on the table that like was on tap for everybody. Like it was just beautiful, beautiful stuff. And it really opened up my world to like a completely different way of living, like I'm coming at you live from, or not live, but like that's a joke I say with like the ESP thing, it's like coming at you live from I don't know where. But anyway, right now I'm in a city, right? And as much as like I love being here in some ways, I also like firmly believe in a world where people can just walk outside to their garden and eat food and like not have to worry about what is being sprayed nearby or any of those types of things. So this showed me intentional communities and the hippie communes that everybody's so scared of. Spoiler, it's a lot of really beautiful people who want to live in a different way, and there are a lot of them, and everybody has a skill that is valuable to those types of communities. So some people pay their rent by building a fence that is needed for the animals. Some people pay their rent by tending to the water or to the garden by watering it and weeding it and that type of thing. And if you're doing it right, you don't actually need to weed, but that's a whole other thing. So I started teaching at these places and meeting people that made my way of being make sense. And that was pretty awesome until it wasn't. And then I met somebody who long, multifaceted and long and dark story later. I met this person, ruined my life, I thought. And now my life's more beautiful than it even was then. But so in that whole darkness time, I died again. And that was a whole other thing that, most of, honestly, I'll never put out into sound because it doesn't deserve a voice. But at that time, I was in my mind and body so terrified that I felt like I was going to die. Like I didn't know if it was going to be an aneurysm or a stroke or a heart attack or what, but I was like feeling all of this like energy that I just was like, a human body cannot sustain this. Like I'm going to die. Like this is where it ends, and I really thought my life was over at this point. And instead of being over, I popped out to like 8 to 10 feet outside the roof above my body, which was inside this space, and could see straight through the roof. Whoa, trippy, right? I was like, wow, this is not normal. Like, and in that, I was also surrounded by so many different spirits, some of whom I've never met in this life. Like I've seen photos of them like in ancestry books and stuff, or like, but some of them I'd never even seen in this life, but I could feel that they were there with me and there for me, and then there was my dog who lived 700 miles away at the time. And like, there was a lot of just stuff that science and the way that we typically think of reality can't explain, right? And both times I was only allowed to go back. It was almost like, I don't play video games, but like just for the sake of simplicity, it was kind of like a video game where like, how you can't enter a door until you have like a certain thing or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was kind of like that. Like my soul had to be in the right place in order to come back. And one time that was conscious and one time it wasn't. One time I was just like already in that space. The other time I had to get myself there. And the experiences were completely different, like completely from each other. So naturally that led to a lot of questions. And we talked about The Proof of Heaven, which everybody should read. It's by Eben Alexander, who's a neurosurgeon who did not believe in heaven or God or anything like that until he had a coma. And he got bacterial meningitis and died or was in a coma. So we talked about that a little more, and anybody who wants to read it can go look at it. That was the only other human being at that time who had an experience kind of similar to mine. The details are completely different, but at least to have somebody who's a scientist and a smart person, and he is a doctor, say these things, it made me feel less crazy and it made me feel more curious. And boy, do I love it now. I mean, like the things that I've discovered with that curiosity, like, yeah, we'll save that for another time. But yeah, so I died. I'm here. It's okay. I firmly believe that like the moments leading up to death are much more terrifying than the actual dying process, and like the coming back and honestly, the coming back is more terrifying than the dying too. Like, because then you're like, wait, whoa,
That's
like, what do I do with this? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you were clairvoyant before you died, though, right?
Yeah. My dad, the first documented case outside of me of this is that my dad swears, and he's a very honest person, as I mentioned. That was like his one rule in my childhood. So he says that I told him my name. Like they had his name as my last name, obviously, but then my middle name is my grandmother's name. So those two were worked out, but like they didn't have the E part. They didn't have the first name, and they had this list, and Emilie wasn't even on it. And this is corroborated by my mom and my dad's versions of these stories, that they didn't have a name, and that my dad sat with me and asked me what it was, and that I told him that it was Emilie. And so he went back to my mom and he said, you know, what do you think of this name? And she's like, well, that's a good one. I like that. And so they picked Emilie. And then my dad's like, okay, well, now that she's here and now that we've decided that, I'm going to go get the newspaper to like have the newspaper for the dead. Well, the headline on that newspaper was Hurricane Emilie hits the coast.
Wow.
You cannot make this stuff up, right? So like,
what a perfect birth announcement, though.
Absolutely. I mean, literally, you could. I mean, if you ask my mom, I bet she would say, like, that could have saved her a lot of what the hell is happening as we went. Because she and I feel like I'm her wild child. Like, I'm her feral child. She is, like, such a beautiful, refined, like, just on it businesswoman. And I am not. So
I love it.
Yeah. Anyway, so but I mean, like that's the other thing we had been talking about that I'm realizing we haven't talked about yet in this bit is the like talking to spirits. Like that was a very common thing. My first memory in this life that I was like in this body, because I remember choosing my parents too, but like in this life I was in my crib and I saw a woman like in the corner of my room, and she was in these like kind of, I don't know, early 1900s type garb, you know? And I've now seen that it was my grandmother. Like I've seen pictures of her now, you know, and I like, that's what jarred the memory actually, was like as an adult seeing pictures and then going back. Anyway. So she came into my room and she said, bad things are going to happen and it's going to be okay. And then she left. And then the phone rang and then my mom started crying. And when I've talked to my parents about this, they said that when my dad was out of town is when my mom got the call that his dad had died. And that was his mom, his mom was the one to come and tell me this. So, you know, those types of things have been really common in my life. And I realize for a lot of people that might sound like, you know, okay, she's just lying, or like, you know, how could that even happen? I have no real explanation for that in a short way at all. But I believe it was Einstein that said everything is frequency, energy, and vibration. And I firmly believe that if you want to try to disprove that theory, you will learn a hell of a lot about life, because it's absolutely true. In my experience. Again, not a doctor, not a
I love it.
Yeah. And then like, I don't know, the thing is like, it got me into trouble a lot. Like it started to go away in my like teens because I tried to shut it down, because it like, when I was little, you know, I could like mostly hear people's thoughts like pretty verbatim, you know? And so, but people don't like their thoughts to be called out. And I learned that from like a very young age, you know, because I didn't mean to do it. right? It was just like, well, why are you thinking about that? Or like, what did you say? And they're like, I didn't say anything. So it's like, oh, okay, like shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. And you do that enough and you kind of lose that practice a little bit. So when I started to have these death experiences and need to understand those better, I felt like I needed to kind of open that up more consciously. And that's one of the things that meditation can help with, and that a lot of different things can help with. We talked about decalcifying your pineal gland earlier, and that's another PSA to anyone, is to look into that. But also, whether you believe in it or not, like, please just at least look at a few things, like drinking clean water, not eating pesticides, not bathing in chlorinated water. Those types of things matter, and they affect your connection to spirit. So, and I say that as a spiritualist.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love what you were talking about. I don't want you to say it exactly the way you did, but it was something about how your spirit is kind of like a muscle,
Yes.
and that it can atrophy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly how I said it before, but I mean, it's true. Like, I remember when my sister broke her leg when she was a kid, and that leg, after months of being in a cast, like her thigh was like this big. How do I fit? And the spirit can do that too, right? Like, so one of the yoga tenets that has stuck with me, because some of it fades based on what is and isn't relevant at the time, but it'll come back, and one that has been pretty consistent, is this idea that, so every thought, every word, every deed matters, right? And the idea here in the yogic tradition is that your thoughts lead to your words, and your words lead to your actions. So if you're mindful of your thoughts, right? And that's where the spirit talks, is in the mind and in the thoughts, right? And it's also where a lot of other things talk. I've always said that intuition is the one that whispers, right? Like, if you picture a crowded room full of people who are all like, blah, 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 like talking over each other, and we have to do it this way and we have to do it that way. The intuition's the one in the corner that's just like, hey, what about this? Like, hey, I kind of feel like it sounds like it would be nice if we did that. That's your intuition. Working with that allows that voice to slowly become stronger and drown out in your consciousness the other voices, right? Whether it's people who have told us things, or ideologies that we've been forced to believe. Like, I even went through today when I was deciding what I was going to wear for this thing. I was like, should I wear a short sleeve or like, we have these ideas about what those things mean about us, right? And that's still in my brain, but it can get smaller. And it's like, well, what do I feel comfortable in? What do I want to wear? And I just got this dress and I'm really excited about it. So I was like, like, that was the one that my spirit was like, I want to wear this one. And as we practice that, we can do that more in our external life. Like, it's easier to, like, okay, in recognizing that I care a lot about people, I can also then recognize that people affect me. People's energy affects me a lot. And it's not just a me thing, but I'm using myself as an example, that as I recognize that, I can start to articulate that to a person that's like, hey, I really want to be there for you right now. And also, this is feeling very aggressive. So like, I'm getting a little bit like defensive, and like, and I would rather have this type of conversation. These types of languages, like, and that's not a great example at all. But my point is, it starts inside. It starts internally within you. And when you can recognize what's going on within you, then you can recognize how things affect you. And then you can set boundaries as it feels fit to you on, hey, this is a space where I don't want to be anymore. Maybe a job or maybe whatever. Like, I've been in so many spaces in my life that at some point in my life, I was like, you know what? I'm out, and like, and this has come out in like, I don't know, this has come out in playful ways, right? Like, in college at parties, it was always like, we don't know where Emily is. Like, that was like the running joke in my friend group, is like, but she's somewhere, like, she may have left, I don't know. But like, I would just not want to be somewhere because it was too much energy, and I would just walk out the door and just go wander with the trees, or like, something like that. And it's also come out in not lighthearted ways at all, where that was the only thing I had left, it felt like. There were times in my life where I felt like I was going to die and not come back. And I became sort of obsessed, actually, not sort of, completely obsessed with the idea of living authentically, because I really thought I was going to get to a place at some point very soon where I was not going to be alive. So that doesn't sit right very well when you aren't living the way you want to be living. Like, still to this day, there are so many books I would like to write. There are so many projects I would like to do, so many things I would like to create. But I'm a lot closer to that now than I was then, and so that became a point of focus for me.
I think this would be a good time if you want to tell us what you're doing coming up, events where people can find you this summer and online.
Sure. So as far as online goes, the website's in the works right now, but the best place right now to follow everything that I'm doing is going to be on Instagram at By Way of ESP. It's just like that. By Way of ESP, no anything else. And yeah, this crystal class in December and yoga class. So again, going back to that energy, frequency, and vibration, being everything that we are and everything that we experience, crystals and yoga fall into that in kind of two different languages, right, to describe these things. So I'm really excited you guys came up with this idea, because this was totally not my idea at all, just for anyone listening, but I love it. So what we're doing is everybody's bringing a crystal, and the idea is it's going to be a $10 crystal for everyone. So it's an equal exchange going through the process. But everybody gets to pick something that's special to them, something that feels loving for them to give away to someone else. And then similarly, you're going to receive a crystal given to you by someone in this cohort that we're creating, that you get to take with you out on your healing journey. And it's going to be this kind of mystery surprise from the universe of a piece of energy for you to work with. And yeah, so in that, we're going to be discussing crystals. I heard you guys did this last year, which is really cool. I did not know that until we talked earlier. So that's really cool. And I love that this year you decided to integrate yoga. So for me, that is probably going to be a very yin yoga would be a way of describing that, a very relaxing, a very calming practice. I wouldn't expect people to be there to want to move or get a workout necessarily, but we're going to be discussing a lot of really deep yogic concepts. And yoga, we mentioned this before, but there are 8 limbs of yoga, and the physical postures or asanas of that's only one piece. So there's meditation, there's breath work, there's all sorts of different things. One of my favorite yogic concepts that I feel like does not get talked about enough in the world, and even in the yoga community, is ahimsa, the concept of doing no harm. And that includes to yourself, right? That includes negative self-talk. That includes what you purchase, right? And all sorts of different things. But there's a lot of free flow in both this class and in yogic theory. And that's really all I'm trying to highlight here, is that what exactly is going to come out is going to be defined and refined based on whoever shows up, and their energies that they're bringing with them. And also it will be guided as a meditative restorative yoga class that includes a lot of information about the various crystals. And yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm really excited.
Yeah, that one's going to be
and
a
that's
really
when
beautiful one. December 15th.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I just realized I didn't say yes, December.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah. Well, and when you were talking about your yoga practice earlier, you mentioned the relationship between yoga and crystals, which you touched on here. But how do you feel like crystals kind of enhance that experience for people. And
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm so glad that you brought me back on that point, because I would have been listening back to this like, oh, I didn't say that part. Yeah. So the hardest thing when I teach people anything is, usually people can pick up a lot way quicker than they think they can. And usually they're also a lot further ahead in the journeys than they think they are. But one of the hardest things, I think it's very counterintuitive to, or well, I don't like counterintuitive as a word, but it's counter to our society right now, is meditation, right? The state of being slow and balanced and careful and methodical and mindful in our thoughts and our words and our actions. And that is really hard for people. It's really hard when you have kids. It's really hard when you don't have kids. It's really hard when you have a job. It's really hard when you don't have a job. Like, there's so many things that make this challenging for us. And also, nobody taught us this stuff, right? Like, in the East, they learn these things as children, right? We aren't learned. We aren't learned. Over here in America, we aren't learned. I bet you didn't know there was a redneck inside here, did you?
There's a redneck inside all of us.
I hope so. I say that, I love country people. Like, my mom grew up north of here, and like the people from that area are such good, like, honest and humble and humbling with their wisdom, because it does not have to be complicated. Like, we can go fancy words all day, but sometimes the simplest way is the best way to say it. Anyway, so this balance of living in the modern world as a peaceful, calm, balanced version of yourself is crazy concepts to people, or people are like, this would sound nice, but how? And when you tell somebody, like, the first time I was taught to meditate, I was told to sit still and think of nothing. Okay, you're talking to an autistic, ADHD, very creative, very like neurodivergent person who likes to move. I've got fire in my chart. Like, yeah, like, so I just thought, I can't meditate, right? And I get that reflection from people a lot, that they're like, I can't do this, but they can. And for me, getting something outside of myself, like that flame that we talked about, where I was in a dark room. The first time I meditated, I was in a dark room. As we're in our mind, as you're witnessing live right now, right? We ping pong kind of in our brain. And to get something outside of ourselves that we can focus on, this is actually why I paint my nails too, is like, just to kind of focus on something for a second that's a single small thing, right? That can be a flame, that can be a crystal. And that is where this class comes in, and why I think it's so brilliant to talk about both in the same conversation, is because when we have something physically out in front of us, we can kind of focus on that thing. And also in doing that, our mind focuses and the thoughts are quieter. And when people experience that, it's really peaceful. And it's almost scary how much more energy you feel like you have all of a sudden. You're like, wait, I feel fine. I feel like I could go like do anything I want to do in the world. Or, wow, I haven't been that calm in so long. Or, geez, I haven't thought about that in forever. It's not always a fun feeling coming out of meditation, right? But you get this totally other world. And I think that is a very hypnotic feeling for people. And so in that, whatever calls to you, I highly encourage you do. And if you've ever been interested in crystals, this is a really good way to, I guess, justify your interest in them if you need one. I mean, I don't personally, like, but for people who are like, oh, is it just a rock, or is it, because people talk about it kind of silly, right? Where sometimes I think crystals are touted as this like miracle giver, right? Like, oh, this is going to give you clarity, or this is going to make you happy, or give you good dreams. No, it won't, right? What happens in your life is what needs to happen in your life. But a crystal can help you focus enough to understand those things and be able to make changes as you need. Yeah, so that'll be our class. I'll be here. You guys will be here. And then,
And
whoever's
this summer.
Oh, and then this summer, I'm really excited to be up at it's the big Cottonwood Canyon Flea Market. So it's BCCF is what I was trying to think of. Cottonwood Flea Market. That is every Sunday. I'm going to be there 6 of the Sundays between now and September. And then I have a couple other markets. There's one called, I think it's Woodbine Market. It's on, I don't know, it's somewhere downtown area in Salt Lake. And there's a couple others. Anyway, this is why we were saying the Instagram thing. Like all of that will be on Instagram, the details of that. But yeah, I'm going to a lot of these markets and that's been really fun. It's a chance for me to get to speak with a lot of people that I might otherwise not, and the possibilities. I mean, that's going back to the street corner, right? Like, I mean, that's what that started and why it was so fun for me and so inspiring. I mean, it really initially kind of felt selfish, like it was just a fun thing that I was doing. But then I also was like having all these people that were so interested in it, that were buying these crystals and like I was like, wow, there's really a need for this too. Like, and so as I started to see that, I started to try to look into markets, like, and all of this was like reflections from the people and from the universe. Like somebody would ask, what market are you going to? And I'm like, I don't know yet. And then it was like, oh yeah, maybe look into markets, and then I looked at a couple other, I don't know if I talked about the Women's Business Center in this part of it, but they're awesome. And they have a lot of different women-owned businesses in so many different industries in that, and free training for everybody. And in those training courses, you like all talk, right? And so there are other makers and other this and that would like bring me a recommendation, or somebody would say, hey, you have to go try to get your products in this place. And, and so I just started following those breadcrumbs, and we're now at markets and busy all summer and like doing all kinds of stuff. But I like it because busy is such a relative word. Like the markets are a chance to speak to anyone who wants to come talk to me about literally anything, and so that's fun for me. And I think for the most part, it's fun for other people.
I love it so much.
Thank you so much for keeping me on like the things that have needed to be discussed and stuff. I'm just like, yeah.
No, it's so perfect.
We got this.
But I do want to hear more about your body butter. You were like in the process of telling us when I realized I wasn't recording. So please go on. Tell us kind of the development and the inspiration behind it.
Yeah. So again, I'm just going to go off the cuff with that and what I remember of what we've talked about, but feel free to like mention other things or anything. Tell me to stop saying that or something. I don't know, whatever you want to do. But, so yeah, we were talking about it in the context of decalcifying your pineal gland. And for me, so like I started being a vegetarian when I was 14. And that was for environmental reasons, really. Like I learned that it was one of the worst industries for the environment. And that was it for me on that. For a while, I now eat everything as defined by my own body, what feels good to me. But I've been a vegan, I've been a vegetarian, I've been all raw superfoods. I've, eaten garbage, like literal garbage handed to me when I was like on the side of the road singing for my food. And there was like a lot of things. Like, I've been in dark places. But anyway, all of that has wrapped its way around to me wanting to find products for my body. Like I can't completely call myself a tomboy, right? Like I love a good bubble bath. I love to be able to like treat myself in those types of ways. And I also don't want formaldehyde on my fingertips. I don't want to be showering in chlorine. And so I've done as much as any human in a city can really do to find alternatives, right? Like one example is there's a $15 thing that can carbon filter your water that comes out of your shower, right? So like that's what I fill my bathtub with when I take a bath. And it's not great, but it's better. Anyway, so all of that ethos is what I took to this butter. because I wanted a hydrating product. I wanted something, I call it all purpose butter because I really wanted it to be one thing that I could use for anything. So it has naturally antibacterial properties, it has naturally antioxidant properties, it has all sorts of different like viscosities of oil and different nutrients and minerals and vitamins and things in your that your skin needs to be healthy and glow and all those sorts of things. And it's also antibacterial and antifungal. So you could literally put it on a wound. Like I healed this. Well, you won't be able to see my tattoo. I don't even know what angle to show it, but I've healed this tattoo completely with that. And also this one actually, completely with it. So, and then a pet store picked it up because it's great for pets. It's safe for kids. Like I wanted it to be good for anybody, and it's unscented for that reason. I've thought about, and I've had some people ask me about doing like maybe seasonal scents, is the idea that I've considered. But, ultimately I wanted to make one thing that was good for anybody. And so I limited all the ingredients down to what I felt like was necessary to maintain a super high quality skincare product. So there's things like apricot kernel seed oil in there, and rose hip seed oil, and argan oil, and jojoba, and olive oil, and vitamin E, and coconut oil, shea butter, and beeswax. And that's it. That is it. That's seriously all that's in there. And every single one of those ingredients is absolutely amazing. I'm just wanting to be fully honest. I'm like, did I forget something? But there literally is no anything. Vitamin E is the only preservative in there. And there's a lot of benefits to using things like that on your body. The reason I made it though, instead of just buying this somewhere, is because oftentimes things that are first off, also a lot of beeswax is usually not always great, but also, especially when we go to other countries outside of America, the trade is not anywhere close to fair. Oftentimes the companies, like, I won't name names, that have these like big mall stores where they have clean products or vegan products or that. It's like, well, that might be true. Like the one that really irks me is cruelty free, because no, it isn't. Because if it's packaged in plastic, no, it isn't. Like there's cruelty happening somewhere just to make plastic, period. And so like in that, I wanted a standard that I didn't really see out there. And I was like, well, I've never really been a brand loyal person, so I started looking all over, and there just wasn't anything that was like this that I knew for sure was only good things. And I started that when I was doing the yoga teacher training. So what I was funding with my dollar became even more important to me than when I was a kid. It was like, what do I want to support? So there's, for example, the shea butter we talked about is from Baraka Impact, where the women who make the shea butter have been doing it for thousands of years, and they do it in the same way their ancestors have been doing it, and they own equity in that company. And so like they send you a postcard with the woman and her story who made that particular bag of shea butter. Like it's so cool. And, that's the type of thing that I source. So, and then, the beeswax comes from the mountains right there, or right there, depending on where you're looking. But yeah, so it's something that I really love. And I really honestly just made it because I wanted it. And then as I started showing it to people, they're like, well, what's in this? This is great. Because when people think of an all oil balm, I think oftentimes we think of like this greasy thing. Going back to my textural issues, like that is another thing that I was like hesitant to buy these like $150 bottles of stuff that say they're really great, but they're packaged in plastic and I don't know how it feels. And like, anyway, so yeah, I mean, that's where I was going to go in with the viscosities part. Is like the beeswax holds it all together, but there's also things that absorb really easily into your skin. And so it absorbs really easily, and the beeswax like seals it, like when I get out of the shower and put that on my body, and I literally use it anywhere. Like if I soak my feet, I put it on my feet. I have no calluses. I don't know how with how much I walk outside, but like, I really think that this has a lot to do with it. yeah, I love it. And as I've started showing it to people, people loved it too. And then people started asking me where they could get it. And then this pet store picked it up. And then people started to hear about it and ask about a website. And I was just like, oh, dang, okay. So it feels really good. It honestly, like, I've spent so many times in spaces where I didn't feel like I was where I should be. And this is one of those, like, I truly believe we are always where we're supposed to be, but this feels like it for me. Like, this feels like what I want to be doing is helping people find what heals them and offering people tools to do that. Like, they go hand in hand, right? Because it's one thing to say, oh, I really want to eat clean. But if you don't know how to do that, then it becomes overwhelming, right? And then you don't do it. Like, anything that has ever been foreign to the point of incomprehensible is something that I haven't done, right? So then the natural antidote to that is to learn about it. And then when you learn about it, then, okay, you learn that these crystals can help you with certain things. Well, where do I get them? Okay, well, then why don't I sell those too? You know? So it's kind of just formed really organically.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I love
Super
I feel
cheesy
like-
pun not intended.
I'm here for it.
It's perfect.
It is though. Oh, and we talked about wild crafting too. I want to share that just because it goes into that whole concept of where I believe we're going towards as humanity is going back to the earth and living in harmony with her. And wild crafting is an ancient practice that now has a name, which is basically just to wander somewhere that is untouched by humans and gather the plant matter and use that either through water or other methods like oils or a great extraction method. Yeah, so I'd love to teach a class on that too one day.
my gosh,
If like people
yes.
want to make their own stuff, I would love that.
Maybe we could do like a wild crafting walkabout. Like go to a
That
good
would be
spot. We
so
can all
fun.
collect our herbs and things.
Oh my goodness,
That's
that's
a-
the perfect
A
Like,
springtime
That is a
activity.
beautiful idea.
hike for a retreat. Is like, let's go wildcraft and then bring it
Yeah.
back. And
And then bring it back and make magic.
That would be amazing. Yeah. And I was thinking too, like a 2-part thing where like people could like come or they could just make stuff or they could do both, you know, like have like 3 pieces that they could do. For me, it has been very empowering to learn how to do those things. And I think especially as like a woman bodied person, empowerment is huge. And really, I'm learning that men have their own journey with that too, of like what it means to be empowered in a non-toxic way, you know? And that is something that they're working on. But yeah, I mean, these types of things, like everybody can benefit, you know. From time to time, I have somebody that says, oh, I'm allergic to shea butter, or I'm allergic to coconut oil, or I just learned that coconut oil is not good for kids with psoriasis who are under 3 years old. Just learn this because a woman had a child with psoriasis who was under 3 years old. And so she said that was her reason that she couldn't try the butter on him.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so the point is, if you see my butter and you're like, oh, that would work for me except for X, well, wouldn't it be awesome if you could just make your own version and add and omit things that work for you, you know, and have language and understanding of how to do that? Like, it's really not complicated. Like every single thing that I really love to teach is something that has been talked about for thousands of years, you know? So these are things that they aren't new concepts, but they are oftentimes for people not things that are in our consciousness anymore. You know, we've been kind of progressively further and further from nature. And now we don't, I mean, Adam and I were laughing about this, my partner, we're laughing about this the other day. Like, picture yourself or like the average American or anyone in modern society, right? Like, if you just dropped the average person off in the woods and said, like, good luck, you know, like, how are you going to make shelter? How are you going to find food? How are you going to, like, we're so far from nature. So to kind of bring nature into the city feels really good, you know, and like, there's a lot of possibilities. I'm so glad I found you guys. Like, I'm so glad this exists here. First off, like, this feels like an offering that would be in Portland or like, you know, like these types of things are a lot more common up in Oregon, and there's nothing like this here, you know, and like finding you guys has been just such a beautiful outlet for just my creativity and my weirdness, you know, to like be witnessed in that light here in a place where I used to not be that way at all. And like, I don't know, it's been really great. So thank you for everything you guys do too. I mean, what are the other, there's been so many podcasts that I've missed and so many like YouTube videos too. I keep seeing things on Instagram at times when I can't go. So like anybody listening to this who's not super familiar with Academy of Logic and Light, like go do their stuff. The Yoni Steam, like I knew that it was going to be beautiful because anybody who's even talking about practices like that is coming from a place of really deep knowledge, you know? And so I had good thoughts about it going into it, but it was even more amazing. And so like therapeutic as like a whole, and also as an introvert or like an ambivert, you know, where sometimes around groups of people, groups of strangers and groups of women, sometimes, you know, it's like a little bit nerve-wracking to like just be yourself. And this is the space where like anybody, I mean, there are people from like all walks of life and different ages, different groups in different ways. Like it was so amazing. And I felt like we just walked out of it with this like little container. So that's what I hope to create for anybody who's listening to this, who's thinking about coming to those classes. Like, this is why I want to work with the Academy of Logic and Light. And like, I don't know. I mean, the possibilities are endless. So let's keep talking for sure.
That's my favorite sentence. But also the way you explain your business model is the exact same way that we kind of do ours, that we shouldn't be gatekeeping things because of money. And also offering people a variety of options to come and learn a different thing, whether you want to participate or observe. And it's like, these are all things that we want to, are like very passionate about. So like it was just kismet that we met.
It's so true. Can I touch on something that I feel like is really important to note in this? Because I kind of like accidentally brought a piece of it out, but like I said, singing on the street, right? So like after the second experience of dying, that really hellish time, literally everything that I had physically to my possession was stolen at that time, which meant I had no home, I had no money, I had no wallet, I had no identification, I had no anything, right? And like, mind you, the cops did not believe what happened to me and wouldn't go investigate it. The hospital came back with nothing except an amphetamine in my system, which I had told them I had been drugged on multiple different, like, it was like they kept me up and put me down and kept me up and put me down. Sorry, trigger warning, post. Anyway, point being, I was kind of left to myself in the spirits in this phase of my life, right? And that's where I just started singing on the street, not with an intention of making money. Literally, I was wandering through a parking lot the first time I made money, just singing to process what was happening. Because like I grew up very privileged. I had all the advantages of life, right? Like I was going to college. I had all these things going for me. I had my yoga teacher training. I had all these things. And it was just all gone in a second. And now I'm a stranger on a street corner who nobody in this town cares about. Right. And that was a huge reality check. So when we talk about not gatekeeping information, like that's so important to me because this is the kind of thing that was not accessible to me in almost anywhere. Because even often when you would go to these like donation-based yoga classes or these different things, it felt very like, you know, like I remember going to one thing like that and feeling just completely not okay being there. Like people were looking at me and I hadn't showered in a while. And like, you know, so coming out of that, I will never turn somebody away. I don't care what their situation is, unless they're posing a threat to my safety, they can come hang out. Like,
yeah.
So yeah. And then, you know, the people who fund that come along too, right? Like there's a lot of people with financial abundance who can support and hopefully do support what you guys do. And, you know, I've found that in myself. There are times when I don't know like how I'm going to make ends meet. And this is more, I'm talking in the past, like now I feel pretty comfortable in that way, but I've seen it work for years. And that's why I feel comfortable, where it's like money comes and goes. And sometimes we have it and sometimes we don't. And whether you have it or you don't, that doesn't mean you should or shouldn't get to go to yoga, or you should or shouldn't get to treat yourself or learn something or do something kind for yourself. So I really love that you guys do it like that too. That was a lot. I'm sorry. That I feel like I just kind of like
I love it.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Well,
It's definitely something that unites us, having that opinion. So we're
yeah,
so glad you're here.
will you guys say your astrological things again? That was such a fun part of the conversation that I felt like it's just like we have to at least get some of that back. That was so cool.
Okay, first tell us what sign you are.
Well, wait.
Okay. You want to make us guess again? We were both so wrong.
No, it was funny though. Like I love that. I was genuinely complimented because I was like, hey, basically for anybody listening, my conclusion was I guess I must have like done a lot of work in this life to like come off that way now, because I'm a Leo sun, I'm a Virgo moon, and I'm a Taurus rising. So there's a lot of fire, there's a lot of perfectionism, and there's a lot of stubbornness. And that's apparently not how I came off. We'll just leave that there. But what are you guys?
I am a Pisces sun, Pisces moon with Aries rising and all of the fun things that come with that. So
yeah, my sister is an Aries. I'm like, there's a lot that comes with that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And a lot that comes with Pisces too. Like, especially,
so
I don't know very many people who have both in their sun and moon. Like that's a lot.
It's a weird combination because my whole life, my Aries self was like, bitch ain't no Pisces, like gross. I hate all of the things it has to say about this. And then people were like, find out your moon sign. And I was like, it's also Pisces and I want to fight all of you, which again is maybe not the most Pisces thing. It's a little bit Pisces, but like the actual act of fighting them, which I was so close to doing.
Yeah.
But then I learned that I was an Aries rising and I have a stellium in Aries. And as I like learned more and more, I was like, oh, the reason why I was a photographer, the reason why I'm so drawn to like spiritual evolution is my Pisces side. And then there's that Aries side that makes me be like, well, we got to put this shit in a podcast, guys. Like, let's make that happen. It's a good idea because I feel like a lot of the spiritual community is full of people who have great ideas, amazing, inspired, beautiful ideas, but they don't have the ground. Well, not that it's not grounded, but they just don't have the push, the fire, the like know-how, the business minded and the desire to like make it happen.
The business minded part. I raised my hand while you were saying that. And that's it for me. It's like coming back down, like beams of light are not hard for me, but like lasering that in is, and so this is, yeah, you're so good at that. And what was the other thing you said about it too, where you were like, nothing in my chart wants to stay still. Like I loved that. I was like, yes, that is so true, both with the Aries and the Pisces.
Yeah.
Like the flow and then like the go. But there's no stagnation.
No stagnation.
No.
And speaking of go, Miss Capricorn.
Capricorn. It was funny because I hated astrology because my horoscopes were like so business minded. And I was like, whatever, I'm not a Capricorn. And my friend was like, you've literally owned a business since you were 8 years old. I was selling my painted rocks, which I still paint today. And then I always had my own dog walking business and a marketing company by the time I was in high school. Like I had a lot going. I've always had a business.
Dude.
And my Libra moon and Leo rising. So
That's
between
right.
all of us, we get shit done.
Yes.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, I love Capricorns too. Like one of my favorite human beings on planet Earth is a Capricorn. And yeah, he was in my yoga teacher training with me. And
wait, a male Capricorn was your favorite? This is fascinating.
Yeah. No, to be fair, so this is I'm glad you said that because it's bringing me to a point that we hadn't brought up, which is like the healed versus unhealed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because you may or may not have just outed yours, I out the Scorpio was the one that I thought of as this, but that he has done a lot of work and is very much in tune with his feminine side as well, and has done a lot of work on the like toxic masculine side to be like a balanced Capricorn. And so, I mean, I don't think of him as, but just like I don't think of you, like you don't seem like a stereotypical Capricorn to me. You don't seem like a stereotypical Pisces to me. Like, but that's another part of the conversation that we had been having, right? Is like these aspects are not entirely you, and you're not in the Leo box or the Capricorn box or the Pisces box. You're partially Pisces, and you're also partially Aries. And now I'm like getting all confused between all of them, you know, but and then within each of those aspects, we have healed and unhealed qualities, right? And like, I don't know, like the Capricorn with the Libra to me is so interesting, because I feel like that's like the Libra side of you is the side that I like noticed first, you know? And then I noticed the Capricorn later, which like I tend to think of the moon and sun signs as like your sun sign is what other people see in you, and your moon sign is like you internally, kind of. But like for you with me, it was the opposite. It was like I noticed that like very balanced, very grounded, very like kindness and what is right oriented. And then I learned about, oh yeah, and I have this like business that's doing this for free for everybody. Like I'm like, dude, cool.
Also a 0-degree Libra moon, so then I still have like kind of Virgo-y tendencies.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. I got some of that.
Yeah. Well, and I was gonna say that's what I loved about your chart you were talking about, Emily, is that I feel like a Leo can be so egocentric, and at least for me, the Virgos I've met are very like, at the very least, like people pleasers. Like they don't want people to walk away upset. And so I feel like there can be I mean, obviously, if you were both of those things, how horrible. But like finding the balance between those two things makes you who you are, and like makes, you know, this beautiful, you know, someone who can like accentuate their self while also being like, but you don't need to be upset about it, you know, someone who straightens crowns instead of knocks them off. And so
true. I mean, my hand went on my heart just because I'm like, you are literally describing me as an unhealed person. And I don't claim to be fully healed right now at all, by the way, but I'm a lot more healed than I have been in other phases, than in any other phase of my life. And with that comes a lot more cohesion between that Virgo and Leo side. Like, because previously it was that hell that you were describing, where it was like, I want to do whatever I want to do and be whoever I want to be. And then, oh wait, I just made somebody upset. Now let's overthink that for 1,000,000 years and feel bad about it forever, you know? And instead of doing that, now it's like, okay, the continual refinement piece, right? Which we touched on being like the kind of lighter interpretation of Virgos, who I am well aware are often thought of as like bitches. And yeah, I am in some ways, in my unhealed sense, right? Because if something is supposed to be a certain way and it isn't that way, that irks me like nothing else. And it can be like the littlest things. But instead of letting that rule my life, I instead say, okay, what would I like to do a little differently, right? Instead of like overthinking it forever, be like, okay, maybe next time I get into that situation, I could handle it like this. And then moving on, right? And not identifying too much with any one label, for me, has been critical in my survival, like to every extent, you know, like every diagnosis I received, I consciously chose to take with a very strong grain of salt. Like I would listen to it and I would own that as part of my reality, but I wouldn't let it become, I'm an alcoholic and that's all I am, or I'm going to die because a doctor told me to, or told me I was, you know. These labels can mean whatever you want them to mean, and that's where I find value in astrology. And that's kind of another thing we were talking about that I'm realizing now hadn't come out again in this one, was like the language of one perspective on what was happening in the cosmos at the time you were born and what that might mean, right? And how you want to interpret that and how you want to heal with that is totally up to every person, right? Like I really get annoyed when people are like, oh, well, I'm a this, so that means I'm like that. It's like, no, you just said that, which is why you're like that, because you believe that is why you are, you know. And belief in neuroplasticity is a whole other conversation. But one thing I am thinking would be good to note for people who think I'm full of shit is like, Okay, so this study was done by North Face, and it was when I was a junior or a senior in college. So it was like 2014 or something, but you can look this up. It was funded by North Face, and they had half of the people run for however much, let's say 90 minutes a day, right? They had the other half of people visualize running for 90 minutes a day. And then they came back and saw what are the benefits physically, mentally, whatever. And they said that 60, depending on which metric they were talking about, it was 60 to, I think it was like 90% on some of them of the exact same benefits were given to the people who were just visualizing. And you think about it, and I mean, Viktor Frankl talks about this too in his book about so Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about what he calls the will to meaning, right? And having a will for your existence. He says it can help. He says a man who has a why for his existence can bear almost any how, you know? And that idea of like focusing on what you care about, right? Don't focus on the things you don't want. And manifestation girlies, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's like, if you don't want something in your life, don't think of it like that, because you should be thinking about what you do want in your life and taking steps towards those things. And that's what starts to manifest, right? Just like if you start to sit there and really tear yourself up, which I and everybody on this planet has done, what does that do? Does it ever leave anyone feeling better? Because if so, please let me know. Like, you know, it just reinforces like, oh, you're not worthy. Oh, you're not a good person. Oh, you're not smart. Oh, you're whatever you're telling yourself. But that's only true because you believe it. And that goes back into the atrophy thing that we were talking about, right? Your muscle, your strongest, most powerful muscle in your body is your brain. And it's this complex system that makes a computer look like nothing. So to hone in the powers of that is where everybody's power is, you know, like to figure out what you are and to learn how to direct that in a way that feels authentic for you. That's the work. I firmly believe that that's what we're supposed to do here as humans.
Which is like the perfect way to end.
Oh,
Yes.
oh,
It's
good.
Like literally.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for
2
coming.
full
by
hours
here.
of beautiful information. Nope.
Ain't no
Only-
thing.
We know you more than we do, for sure.
Well, that's okay. I mean, I hope that for anybody listening to this, that this has been helpful to you, inspiring to you. These guys are amazing. I mean, I wouldn't be here if they weren't. And I hope that means something to you guys based on this conversation.
Yeah. Well, and I know I kind of mentioned it before, but like our purpose is to give a platform to people who are reaching out, who are trying to help heal, who are trying to give this information and this knowledge, because like we said, like we are on the same page. There's a reason why we ended up in each other's lives, because we're so driven to the same work. And and there's so many different ways and so many different individuals who honestly are helping people that, you know, not everyone's going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that's great. But there are people out there looking for ESP. You know, they're looking for you, Emilie. And
and likewise, yeah. And I love, as you were saying that, I was realizing that there's kind of an interesting duality between what you guys do and what I do, right? Because there's so much healing that can be done individually, and that's really what I do, is help people tap into that. And then there's also so much healing that needs to be done in community, and to be witnessed and to be held in a safe space where people are like-minded and supportive of that journey. I mean, how many people cried in that, including myself, right? Like and everybody felt safe, right? People felt safe to let something out. People felt safe to connect with each other and be their authentic selves. At least I did, you know, and it felt like everybody else there did too, you know? And so I just love it. I really hope we get to work together long beyond this December thing. And also I'm really excited to do that.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to anybody who's tuning into this, seriously, because like the biggest thing is to follow your own spirit, right? And something in you told you to click on this. So like, keep going with that. Like,
yes, absolutely.
You guys are awesome. I love you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining the A.L.L podcast. To find out more, you can find us online at academyoflogicandlight.org or on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Academy of Logic and Light.
If you live in the Salt Lake Valley, we'd love to see you at one of our upcoming events.
And don't forget to support our growth by joining our Patreon.
Until next time, lead with logic and light.